So every year at the Passover Seder, we come across this super famous part of the Haggadah, right? The four sons. You've got the wise, the wicked, the simple, and the one who doesn't know how to ask. But, this isn't just some old story for kids. It's actually a really profound guide to the different mindsets we all run into, both at our Seder table and, honestly, inside ourselves. So let's dive in and see what these ancient archetypes can teach us today.
Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to totally reframe how we think about these four sons. Then we'll get into the deep motivations of the wise and wicked sons, what really makes them tick. After that, we'll tackle the two passive voices, and we'll wrap it all up with a practical guide for how you can actually speak to each of these mindsets on Seder night.
Okay, so the very first thing we have to get our heads around, and this is a big one, is that the Haggadah probably isn't talking about four different kids sitting around the table. It's actually describing four fundamental mindsets, four different ways of relating to our own history and traditions that can all exist inside of a single person. So let's just flip the script for a second. The question isn't, okay, which son is my cousin Bob? The real question is, which of these voices is speaking inside of me right now? And once you make that little shift, the Haggadah stops being just an ancient story and starts being a mirror. And, we can actually find a clue for this right in the Hebrew text. It says, Echad Chacham ve'echad Rasha, which means one is wise and one is wicked. It doesn't rank them, first, second, third. That specific language suggests these aren't separate categories of people, but different facets of one single complex reality. All right, let's kick things off with the voice we all kind of aspire to, right? The wise son, the Chacham. His question isn't just him showing off how smart he is. It actually comes from this really deep desire to connect, to understand how every single piece of the puzzle fits into the big picture of our shared story. I mean, just look at the level of detail in his question. He wants to know about everything, the testimonies, the statutes, the laws. He's not really asking, why are we doing this? He's asking, what are we doing? He wants to understand the function of every single commandment in building our collective destiny. And this gets to the absolute core of it. The wise son is driven by a desire for devakut. It's a Hebrew word that means connection or clinging. He doesn't just want facts for his brain. He wants to feel how every small act, every little ritual, helps forge a stronger bond between the nation and God. For him, it's all about participation, not just sitting on the sidelines. Okay, this next part is super cool because it really nails his mindset. And it all comes down to a tiny, subtle difference in the Hebrew. We'll see in a minute that the wicked son says lachem, which means to you, and it creates distance. But the wise son, he uses the word etchem. Now, they both translate to you, but etchem implies togetherness, being on the same team. He sees himself as completely part of the community he's asking about. He is all in. All right, now let's do a complete 180 and talk about his total opposite, the wicked son, the Rasha. If the wise son asks questions to connect, while the wicked son asks to disconnect, his question isn't a tool for learning, it's a wall he builds to exile himself. His question is short, sharp, and just dripping with cynicism. What is this service to you? In just those few words, he completely separates himself from everybody else at the table. He makes himself an outsider, a critic just looking in from the window. You see, his entire wickedness, if you will, is baked into that one little word, lachem, to you. By saying you and not us, he intentionally rips himself out of the circle, out of the story. And in the view of the Haggadah, that act of self-exclusion is the very definition of wickedness. But you gotta ask, why? What's driving this? Is he just a jerk? Well, the commentators suggest his problem isn't really intellectual, it's emotional. It comes from yaush, despair. He's lost faith in the whole story of redemption. He looks at history, sees a bunch of struggles, and just decides, it's all meaningless. And that hopelessness is what fuels his cynical attitude. And this attitude connects him directly to another famous biblical figure, Esav. The guy who sold his spiritual birthright for a quick bowl of soup. Esav is all about his immediate impulses, what feels good right now. He just can't see the value in some long-term spiritual destiny. The Rasha, deep in his despair, has the exact same worldview. What's in it for me right this second? Okay, so we've got the two extremes. Now what about the two guys in the middle? The simple son, or Tom, and the one who doesn't know how to ask. These two aren't actively connecting or disconnecting. Instead, they're kind of defined by their passivity, their lack of engagement. So it's really important to get the difference here. They're both passive, but in totally different ways. The simple son is kind of just going through the motions. His big challenge is spiritual apathy. He does all the Seder stuff, but it's just out of habit, not real conviction. The unquestioning son, though, he's on another level. His heart and mind are totally closed off. He's so shut down that the idea of even asking a question doesn't pop into his head.
And here's the thing. The Haggadah is really clear that we can't just let them be. We actually have a job to do. For the simple son, it says we have to answer with a strong hand. We need to tell the story with energy and power to shake him out of his apathy. And for the unquestioning son, our responsibility is even bigger. The text says at Patachlo, you open for him. It's on us to create that first little spark of curiosity. Okay, so we've met the four voices. Now for the really important part. What do we do about it at our own Seder? The Haggadah doesn't just describe them, it gives us a clear game plan for how to engage each of these mindsets, whether it's a person at our table or a voice inside our own head.
So think of this as your practical guide. For the wise son, you feed that hunger for connection. Give him all the details, right down to the nitty-gritty laws about the afikoman. For the wicked son, the response is supposed to be a little sharp. You blunt his teeth by telling him, hey, if you had been in Egypt with that attitude, you would have been left behind. You show him the serious consequences of cutting himself off. For the simple son, you use the power of the story to jolt him out of his indifference. And for the unquestioning son, you have to be the one to start the conversation, to open the door for him.
And all of this, really, brings us right back to that first big question. When you're sitting there at your Seder, which voice are you going to listen to? The one that's genuinely curious and wants to connect? The one that's stuck in cynicism and despair? The one just going through the motions? Or the one that's totally shut down? Because, the real goal of the Seder isn't about picking one son as the best and ditching the rest. The real challenge, the real work, is to recognize all four of these voices inside ourselves. It's about engaging with each one of them, using the Haggadah's wisdom, and bringing them all together. The curious part, the cynical part, the apathetic part, and the silent part. And taking all of them on that journey toward freedom.